so before we get started, let me show you what we're going to be using to make our recipe today. So one part of it will be the turkey mini meatloaves that we're going to be making. For that, we need some turkey, first of all, and I've got some Ontario turkey here. I ordered this from a company called Farm to Fork. It is Ontario turkey, and I love this company because the order is delivered to your door and the products are Canadian, which is something that is very important to me. So for our meatloaf, some of the other ingredients that we're going to use for it are some oats. So rather than using breadcrumbs like a lot of recipes call for, we're going to incorporate some oats, and I'll explain why in a little bit. We are going to also use some unsweetened applesauce. And for the flavor, I've got a couple of different things here. I've got some onion powder. It doesn't really matter which brand you use. And I also have this. This is a company that is a family company, family business based in Ontario. These are people that I know personally, and they have an incredible business. They make all of these different spice blends. And the one that I'll be using in this recipe is called the Savoury Stuffing Blend. I love this company because they use Canadian products. They use, in this one, they've got some garlic from Ontario, and all of their products are available for purchase directly from their website online. And they're just a fantastic company to deal with. So I'll be using some of this. And those are basically all of the ingredients we need for a meatloaf. Now we can add some salt into it. That depends. I know that low sodium is important to a lot of people. If that's important to you, then of course leave the salt out. So we'll have our mini meatloaves, and then on the side, we're going to have a bit of a mix of things. So one of the components in that side dish is going to be sweet potato, which we're going to roast. So I've just got a small sweet potato here, and to roast it, I'll be using a little bit of this olive oil. This is extra light tasting olive oil. I chose that because I just don't want it to have a very strong flavor in what we're making today. But of course, you could use any kind of olive oil that you like. I will be sprinkling some garlic powder onto the roast potato, or to the sweet potato, and I'll be sprinkling on a little bit of salt. But of course, this salt is always optional in all of our recipes. The other part that's going to go into the side here is we're going to use some dried cranberries. You can get the kind that has reduced sugar. If you look for it it's usually found in the baking aisle. I really like these, just using a few so that it's not too much added sugar, but it does have a really nice flavor, and you'll see that it's gonna taste really nice in our side here. We will be also adding some apple to the side. I'll be dicing that up and putting in a few pieces. We'll be topping it with some goat cheese. This is PC Blue Menu goat cheese. Of course, you could use any brand that you like. Be making a sauce to go on top of the side dish, which is going to have a couple of different types of mustard in it. If you don't have both of these types of mustard at home, that's okay. You could really just use one or the other. The only reason I'm using two here is just to have a little bit of difference in texture, but of course you could use one type or the other. So here I've got Dijon's regular Dijon mustard, and then I've got some whole grain mustard here. And the other thing that will go into the sauce that we're going to be making is just a little bit of maple syrup, and we'll add in a tiny bit of olive oil too. And that is the sauce that we're going to drizzle on top of the side dish that we're making. Now, a very important component to this dish, and I'm super excited about using, is this. These are microgreens. And these are from a local business called Valley Microgreens. They have several different kinds of these for sale. They are available for sale on their website. And it's an incredible, incredible product because it is loaded with nutrition. And as people get older, sometimes what happens is we might lose a little bit of our appetite. Well, this is perfect because in just using a small amount of this in a recipe, you're getting a huge amount of nutrition. So this is an excellent option for everybody, And I would say, especially for people who might not have a huge appetite, you get a ton of nutrition just in a small amount. These are not something that I would be cooking. This is something that I'll be adding to the side dish and keeping it raw. And you can see that they're delivered live, which I think is really cool. And they're delivered right to your door. So it's quite, I think, quite an amazing product with an incredible nutritional profile. So we'll be using some of these today. I'm pretty excited about that. Okay, so we've got all of our ingredients set up. The type of pan that I'll be making these mini meatloaves in is something that looks like this. This is a mini loaf pan. Don't worry if you don't have a pan like this. You could easily use a muffin tin, or you could even just shape small mini meatloaves and put it directly onto a baking sheet that's lined with foil, and that would work just fine. So you don't need to go out and buy something like this just to make this recipe, but if you happen to have one, it's pretty useful. Okay, so we've got everything set up. The next thing we'll do is I will turn the camera around and I'll show you step by step how to make our meal. All right, so we're ready to cook. The very first thing I'm going to do is get this sweet potato roasting in the oven. So I'm going to peel it, dice it up, and then I'm going to toss it in a little bit of olive oil with some salt. That's always optional, of course, and some garlic powder, and get that going. So here we go. Okay, so now I'm going to dice up this potato and I'm going to put it into a bowl. I'll add a little bit of olive oil, I'll toss it all up with some garlic powder and a little bit of salt, and then it'll be ready to go into the oven. All right, so I've got this chopped up. I'm just going to put it into a bowl. I'll add a little bit of olive oil to it. And some garlic powder. You've got the recipe that's available to you, and you'll see that I've added a certain amount of garlic in the recipe, but it's to taste. So if you're somebody who loves garlic, feel free to add in a little bit more. If you don't love it so much, then of course you can always put in less, or you could leave it out altogether. It's totally up to you. Next thing, a little bit of salt. Of course, you can always leave this part out. Always listen to whatever your physician or medical professionals have told you about salt and anything else that's related to your diet. It's super important. Okay, so now that that's done, I'm just going to mix it all up. I'm just trying to coat it so that there's olive oil on all of the pieces that I've cut up. A little bit earlier, I set up a pan, I put some foil on top. I'm just going to give it a quick little spray, just a little bit of cooking spray so that the sweet potatoes don't stick to it. Doesn't need to have a ton on it. And now I'll just put the sweet potatoes on there and spread it out. So the roast potatoes are in the oven, and they're going to take a little while. So while those are roasting, I'm going to prepare the turkey meatloaf. So first thing we need is our ground turkey. This is lean ground turkey, like I mentioned before. I've got some oats here that I'm going to be adding. And I know that a lot of recipes for meatloaf call for breadcrumbs, but I'm using these oats because it just adds that extra bit of fiber, and which is something that's really important for everybody's diet. So I'll add this in here. I'm going to add in a little bit of applesauce as well. This is unsweetened. Don't worry too much about the measurements because I've got the recipe that's included for you. So you can always go, if you're interested in making this, you can always take a look at the exact measurements. So we've got our turkey with oats and applesauce, and now I'm going to add in some things to give it some flavor. So one of my favorite things to put in turkey meatloaf is onion powder. I'll just sprinkle a little bit of that in there, and then I'm going to add in this Arvinda spice blend that I told you about. This is the savory stuffing blend. I love this. But if you don't have this, then you could always use something like poultry spice. Anything with sage, rosemary, thyme, those kinds of flavors are going to be really nice in this. And you can adjust that to taste. If you're somebody who really likes to have strong flavor in things, then go ahead and put more in than what I recommend in the recipe. Okay, so we've got all of our ingredients in here. I'm going to use a little bit of salt, but again, it's optional. Next thing is just to mix it up. Once I mix it up, I'm going to lightly spray my mini loaf pan that I showed you before. I'm going to put the turkey into 2 of them since we're making a recipe that serves 2. And then I'm going to put that in the oven alongside the potatoes that are already roasting, because the potatoes tend to take just a little bit longer than the meatloaf does. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit, mix this up, put the meatloaf in, and get it going. Okay, so I've got it all mixed up, and now the next thing is to get it into the pan. So I'm just going to lightly spray this and then add the portions of turkey meatloaf in. Okay, so I've just taken the meat, I've divided it into 2 parts, just eyeballing it. And I'm just going to scoop it in. If it's not totally even, well, you can just move a little bit from one onto the other, right? No big deal. Remember, we're cooking for health and for taste. Things don't need to look perfect. They don't need to be absolutely perfect. We're not talking about making restaurant food. We're talking about making healthy, good tasting food at home. So the roast potatoes are done now. I just got them out of the oven. I'm going to set them aside to let them cool off a little bit. And while they cool off, I'm going to take my apple and about half of it, I'll dice it up. Okay, so now everything is prepared for us to make our side. I've got the sweet potatoes that have cooled off a little bit. I have the dried cranberries, I've got the diced up apple, and I have the microgreens. So what I'm going to do is take the sweet potatoes and put them into a bowl like this. There we go, and I'm going to add in the dried cranberries. Add in there. I'm going to add in the apples as well. And I'll just give it a little bit of a mix. Okay, once it's mixed up a little bit, I'm going to take the sauce that we made before and I'm going to drizzle it on top. And we'll give it a stir. It's all mixed up, it's looking really good. When I am ready with the meatloaf, I will be putting this onto the plate next to the meatloaf, And what I'll do is I will put some of the goat cheese that we've got here that's all crumbled up. I'll put some of that goat cheese on top, and then I'll sprinkle it with the microgreens, and I'll show you the end result in just a moment.